Sunday, just after noon, and we have successfully navigated our rental car from Shannon Airport to the town of Ennis, where we're going to get a bite to eat. Lots of little narrow streets here. Some of them blocked off for only pedestrian traffic. We'll drive over these mountains in the distance to get to the coast. The land here is really rocky, with lots of shallow lakes with rocks sticking up out of them, and lots of swans. We've reached the bay and the tide is out at Kilkerrin. No pleasure boats, all working fishing boats. This bird is called a wagtail for obvious reasons. These boats will float again at high tide. We're back out in the boggy moors. The shadows are starting to climb up the mountains. It's 6:30 and we need to move on to get to Clifden before dark. We may not get to Clifden tonight. Seems like around every curve there's another sight just so breathtaking that we have to stop and look again. We did make it to the town of Clifden about sunset and had a fine dinner at E.J. King's here. This morning we're doing shopping while we're waiting for the laundry to be done. There are many bays all along the shoreline here. This one just outside of Clifden. Odd little lighthouse marking the entrance to the bay. And the wild heather and the prickly gorse all seem to grow together, all intermixed with lots of bracken and wild blackberry vines. Here's the whole town of Clifden from the harbor. There's an old abandoned mansion built like a castle 150 years ago. Probably abandoned in the Great Famine. There's the town way off in the distance. The long, long stretch of harbor. All the way out to the ocean. Everywhere we look there, the ruins of old one-room cottages. Here the edges of the fields have been marked with stone walls that keep the sheep from wandering off the edge of the cliff. A lighthouse marks the rocks that block some of the entrance to the harbor at Clifden. Economy fares. And this one must be the high price ticket. Well, here's our B&B for this evening. We've come about 12 miles down the road to get some dinner. and found this beautiful bay. And this hotel against this rocky, craggy mountain behind it. As everywhere else, there are sheep grazing these really steep slopes. It's Tuesday morning and we've had a beautiful rest. It's about 7:30 in the morning and we're getting ready to go again as soon as we have some breakfast. Our first stop this morning is at Kylemore Abbey, less than a kilometer from the guest house where we stayed. Just down the lake shore from the Abbey is a beautiful chapel in the trees. From Kylemore Abbey we can look back down the lake and off in the distance see the place where we stayed last night. Kylemore was built in the 1860s as a private residence. When the man's fortunes failed, it was sold and bought by the Benedictine nuns and turned into an abbey and a school for girls. This beautiful decorated Gothic church was built as a memorial to his wife by the original owner when she died on a trip to Egypt. In 1995, after decades of neglect, this was almost totally jungle, and since 1995 it has been restored. It was interesting to find Monterey cypress growing in this garden. Now that we're back in the countryside, we begin to see more ruins of old castles. This one near the upper end of Lake Corrib, which stretches down this valley almost to Galway. Further down the lake is Ashford Castle, which dates back to the 1200s. A new wing has been added that now is a very upscale hotel. This one is complete with where a drawbridge used to be and 2 sets of gates. It looks the way you think a castle should look. Looking at the stones, you can tell where different sections of the castle are added onto. We're looking at the oldest part here, and then this tower was added onto. And then this section added, and then at some time later, different stones over here. This section was added on, and then another section over here, and beyond that, a new wing where the rest of the hotel is today. It's hard to tell what is newer and what is older. But Ashford was owned by the Guiness family. Obviously the clock on the tower, a newer addition. Because of its current status as a very upscale hotel located on a golf course, this castle has been beautifully maintained. Lovely grounds and long walks off into the forest in various directions. And spectacular views out over the lake. Everywhere little gateways and gardens and paths invite you to explore and discover new vistas. who I found. Here's another interesting discovery. The leaves on this bush look like holly leaves, but it has flowers on it like none I've ever seen before. Come on, man training his sheepdogs. Certain whistles mean different commands. We've reached the town of Athlone on the Shannon River, right in the center of the country. There's a neat old castle here we're going to tour, and also stop at the tourist center to get some leads on where to search for the Geoghegan lands. The oldest part of the castle dates back to the year 1210. It's been added on to many times since then. The most recent battles here took place in 1922, when the Irish Provisional Government captured it from the British. Since then it's been called Castle Adamson for the main officer in that battle. Look what we found inside the castle. It's a receipt from the coffin maker. Nine pleasure boats have just cycled through the Loch from higher to lower water here on the River Shannon. Probably the most interesting of all of the boats is this long, thin canal boat. A couple more boats have come in going upstream. Now they're closing the downstream gates, and they'll flood the loch, raising it to the higher level. I imagine it takes quite a while for the water to come in and fill this up. Here's the smallest floating object going upstream through the lochs. Swam in just before the gates closed, and I guess he'll swim out the other end when the other gates open. Well, the loch tender has collected a fee from each boat. The boats have risen about 6 feet, and they're getting ready to go out again. And away they go. Well, here we are on one of the most interesting stops on our trip. Castletown, Geoghegan. This is the whole town. Just outside of town there's this sudden sharp mound with a lower raised embankment all around it that I'm wondering might have been an old fort at one time. Just outside Castletown, Geoghegan, in Gilbert Carey's field, is this large rock where the Geoghegan chieftains have been inaugurated since the 5th century. Definitely back in the big city. Hustle and bustle and crowds and traffic. We've arrived in Dublin this morning. Now here's a creative display for Coors, made all out of beer cans. Surfer dude catching a wave, and he's riding a shark. Jane and Linda are trying to find public records of the property owned by their ancestor at the valuation office in Dublin. We're definitely back with swarms of people and traffic. Busy, busy place. This is a great pedestrian mall. This morning we're visiting St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin. The cathedral dates back to the 1300s. Johnathan Swift was dean here from 1730 to 1745. It's said that St. Patrick first baptized people here at the site of a well, and the Normans built the first church here in the 1100s. This bust is said to be the best likeness of Johnathan Swift. And now the most popular spot on the city tour. Tour of the Guinness Brewery. Evidently, at least one of the Geoghegan boys was busy in helping Guinness be produced. Most important part of the tour, at the top of the brewery, where you get your own free pint of Guinness. Spectacular view of the whole brewery area. And the old windmill that used to provide power. And a lovely view of the city of Dublin. Next to the last leg between JFK and LaGuardia. Glad I'm not driving this spaghetti maze of on and off ramps. It's 6:30 as we taxi down the runway for leaving New York, which is really 11:30 according to our internal clocks. The time in Ireland. We'll be home in a little over an hour.
Yes.
Leaving the eastern shore behind, heading across Chesapeake Bay on the final stretch toward Richmond. There are the lights of Petersburg. And finally the lights of Richmond.